On today's Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we're going to be discussing how the Florida Panthers season has basically fallen apart with the holiday break currently going on for the Cats. We're going to be discussing who's returned to practice and who hasn't, along with some World Junior updates. And we're going to preview Thursday's game between the Florida Panthers and the Montreal Canadiens, all on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, December 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Ronan. And if you want everything in relation to the World Juniors, make sure to listen to Heidi Kalakash at Locked On NHL Prospects. And don't forget to send in your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel and your 5-star rating to Locked On Panthers on whichever podcast app you listen to the show to win 2 free tickets for the Florida Panthers versus Vancouver Canucks game on January 14th. So, Cats fans, it's been a little bit while since we've spoken. And I honestly, with the performance of the Florida Panthers on Friday, was just kind of, I don't know if I want to call it the tip of the iceberg for really how the Panthers have played really this season, because it's just been various different issues for the Panthers. But this 3-game stretch after the Florida Panthers defeating the New Jersey Devils on the Saturday, which now looks like a long time ago, and then losing to Boston, New Jersey again, where you had the lead going into the third period, and then on Friday scoring the first goal, and then really nothing after that. The Florida Panthers season has fallen apart. And I'm glad I kind of took 5 days to in between the game here and, of course, recording. And of course, with the holiday season going on and work and everything, we're lowering the amount of episodes for this week for Locked On Panthers. But the Florida Panthers season has in fact fallen apart, and they're falling behind. They're falling behind to the point where we don't know if there's a point of no return for this season. But let me bring in my guest on the show. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Jacob Winans. Jacob, welcome back to the show on where we're talking about this Panthers team that is on a not so good note as of now.
Yeah, definitely. First, want to appreciate you having me back. Want to apologize for not being on the show last week. Had a little bit of car trouble right at the holidays. I hope everybody out there enjoyed your holiday break. I know I definitely did. It was nice to rest and recharge. And like you said, with the holidays, we all got to take a few days off from Panthers hockey, and it could not have come at a better time to have a little bit of a break. Mentally, definitely, with the way things have gone heading into the break. A number of things going against the Panthers right now. Injuries. It seems like we for a stretch there we're losing a key player, at least a body leaving the lineup on a nightly basis. Some really tough losses, and now the Panthers find themselves coming out of the holiday break tomorrow against the Canadiens in a position where they are 7 points out of the last division spot and 8 points out of the last wild card spot as it stands currently. That is a giant hole to be in at this stage of the season. It's not impossible because, as we know, win streaks can really turn a team season around. We've seen that happen with the Panthers in the past. We've seen them in an even worse position at the All-Star break just a few seasons ago under Bob Bugner, and come back to miss the playoffs by just a single point in a season where most years that would have gotten them in. So it's not the death of the season just yet, but like you said, it has fallen apart. It's completely off the rails, and now we're going to see what they're made of this next 40 to 50 games left on the schedule. Really giant hole to be in, and we're going to see what this team is made of.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. 8 points behind the second wild card spot with Washington playing tonight. Last time I checked, they were leading against the New York Rangers. But honestly, who cares about really scoreboard watching right now when the Panthers haven't even gone on a 3-game winning streak this season? Before we could even focus on that, they got to come up with some wins, and and you lose Aaron Ekblad again. And we'll talk more about a little bit about Aaron Ekblad in segment number 2 about what's gone on since. But I don't mind Aaron Ekblad going after Oliver Wahlstrom, who after the amount of hacks that he got on Sergei Bobrovsky as well, but just another blow to this team. And also let's talk about how the Panthers players Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett called out the team after the loss on Friday. So it's just and this actually, and even though they're in a bad stretch right now, the guy you traded for, Matthew Tkachuk, and seeing him call out the team with their poor play as well, that makes me feel good about the trade. But at the same time, it's just like, man, there's one guy performing so well individually, and I still think the trade is going to be worth it. But man, it also makes me feel good that this guy is, even though he's a new guy in town, that he is stepping in and saying and just telling it how it is.
I agree. We knew when he got here he was going to be vocal. He's not a guy who's going to sit back and be quiet. He's kind of like the opposite of Sasha Barkov, and that's not a knock on Barkov because his leadership style is different. But it's just a team that is very much led by a low profile, high character, quiet, behind the scenes type of leader. Having that vocal leader also helps. It's a good tandem to have as a leadership group. But the fact that Tkachuk commands that kind of respect in the locker room, just 30 plus games into his Panthers tenure, it bodes well for what we're going to see from him over the next 8 years after this, or the next 7 to 8 years with the Panthers. It's a good place to be in as far as locker room chemistry when he feels comfortable enough to call out the team and hold people accountable. That's what you want. He's being paid like a franchise cornerstone, and he has to lead like one, and he's definitely done that. It's really unfortunate because there's been a handful of players this year that have more than pulled their weight, are having career seasons, and you really want to capitalize on those performances. And I'm thinking of guys like Tkachuk, guys like Brendan Montour, guys like Carter Verhaeghe, who have really exploded into top end talents this year, and the team's record really has nothing to show for that. So it's unfortunate. But the comments from Matthew Tkachuk and from Sam Bennett after the game were pretty alarming. They both used the quote "cheating the game," that there were players cheating the game, which in essence means there's guys out there looking for shortcuts or not giving the extra 10% on a shift or whatever the case may be. It's guys not winning board battles, guys not going for loose pucks, guys not back checking at full speed or as aggressively as necessary. If players are looking for shortcuts on the ice, this is the result you get, because it was very clear in that Islanders game. One team simply wanted to win the game more. The Islanders were swarming, and I don't think there's that much of a talent deficit where the Islanders are concerned. I would argue that we have more talent than the Islanders do. But that was a team that was hungry, and the Panthers looked like they didn't want to be there. There's no other way to put it. That was the flattest performance I've seen from them all year. They simply looked like they didn't want to be there. And Matthew Tkachuk was right for calling them out. And he's more than pulled his weight all year. He hasn't taken a night off, and you want to reward him for that. That hasn't been the case, and calling out the players was the necessary thing. I think since Barkov has been out in a couple of stretches this year, Matthew Tkachuk has really stepped up almost as a as a 1B option as a captain. He's been vocal anytime there's a discussion on the ice. He's right there in the ref's ear. He's vocal on the bench. He's vocal in the room. He's kind of he really takes the A he wears on his sweater seriously, and he steps into that role. So hopefully they follow his lead, and his comments resonated with some guys.
Yeah, let's not forget that this guy was viewed as probably the future captain of the Flames once Mark Giordano was not a member of the team anymore, and also the broadcast on Friday provided all the points that Matthew Tkachuk scored on home and the road. They're almost identical with what he does. So he does it in all phases. So he's leading by example as well. And one more thing before we transition is the Panthers have the fifth toughest schedule in the NHL remaining. And even this is according to Tankathon, and even looking at the quote unquote easy opponents, you look at some of them that they've already played and losing, and these are the quote unquote easy games. Chicago, who they've already lost to. Columbus, they lost to once. San Jose, they blew a 2-goal lead before winning in a shootout. Philly, they've lost to. Arizona, they've lost to. So even with that quote unquote easy schedule, it's just every single game you just gotta not have any expectations for this team and just okay, this is what's considered an easy game, but with this Florida Panthers team and how they performed this season, I just can't. You just can't go to any game just expecting to win anymore.
I agree. Their backs are against the wall now. There are some games that on paper the Panthers look like they're the more talented team. On paper they may have the better record than a lot of teams, but you can't take anyone lightly anymore because one off night, a 2-point swing, or in many cases now they're likely fighting for a wild card spot the rest of this year. I don't think they crack the top 3 of the division. Fighting for a wild card spot now. Every game against an Eastern Conference team is a 4-point game, not just your division opponents. You actually have to look at the Metro and the teams that you're fighting with to get into the playoffs in the Metro as well. A lot of these games are going to be 4-point games, and you drop one of those to a team that may be not as good on paper, and you're in a world of hurt. I think the Islanders, that game that game last week was one of those. That's a team that is right there in the thick of it for that last wild card spot, and that was a 4-point game, and they dropped it. And we're coming out of this break in another one of those against Montreal, a team that's right there with the Panthers neck and neck in the standings at this point. If I'm not mistaken, Montreal has a couple of games in hand. That's a 4-point game. On paper, we're a better team. Montreal is essentially trying to tank. They've exceeded expectations this year, but that is a team that is not intending to be a very good team or compete for a playoff spot. They're playing a lot of young guys, inexperienced guys. The Panthers need to handle business against those teams, the teams that you're supposed to beat. We haven't seen them do it this year, and coming out of the break against Montreal, it's a good chance to do that because it's a must-win game. These are all 4-point games coming up. Montreal, New York, these are teams that you're going to have to compete with. So, it's a dire situation. Their backs are against the wall. Anyone who watched that game against the Islanders, I think Jovo post game really put it well when he's like, some of the comments that Tkachuk and Bennett were saying. It's alarming. It's concerning, and definitely against the wall now. There's really no margin for error anymore.
Absolutely none. And we'll talk more about the Montreal game, and of course, after that, they'll be welcoming another team to town. Just in less than a week later, as one of the teams ahead of them in the New York Rangers as well on New Year's Day. But we're going to talk about who's returned to practice and who has been recalled for the Panthers on Tuesday's practice. But first, we're going to tell you all about Bet Online. And Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting information. Find all the latest in relation to basketball, college bowl season, NHL, and the NBA. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Back on the second segment here on this Wednesday, December 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, on this Winans Wednesday edition of the show. So, Jacob, Barkov, Ekblad, and Chris Tierney were all at practice today for the Cats, all in yellow non-contact jerseys. Paul Maurice did speak about how they wanted to see whether tomorrow whether they will be in regular practice jerseys. So actually I got an email of when the Panthers will be practicing tomorrow. They'll be practicing tomorrow at 11 a.m. So we'll know around that time tomorrow. But I believe Barkov will be. Barkov will be back, but I'd be a little cautious about bringing Ekblad back after how he was like dangling his shoulder once he was going to the locker room, which looked very ugly. Chris Tierney, of course, suffered the concussion in the Columbus game, which the Panthers were down to 10 skaters at one point, and those are concussions. It's been a talking point of South Florida sports, especially what's happened on the football side of things this past weekend. But of course, with those guys being in yellow contact jerseys, we'll know more tomorrow. They'll be in regular practice jerseys. Radko Gudas was in a regular practice jersey. So and Matt Kierstead, even though he was a paper transaction sent down to Charlotte, he was automatically sent back to the Florida Panthers, even though he wasn't present at practice. So Grigory Denisenko and Giovanni Smith were sent back to Charlotte, even though Giovanni Smith got into a little bit of an underwhelming fight on Friday. Just barely any punches landed. But this is the one I'm really excited about, and this is one that we've talked about during the summer. Is looking to make his NHL debut probably on Thursday. Is Anton Levchi. We have an episode all the way back like mid-June when Bill Zito was starting to make his signings. And one thing you guys need to know about Anton Levchi, if you guys don't know about him, he led Liga, the top league in Finland in scoring, 26 goals, 35 assists for 61 points, and his team Tampere won the championship in Liga. So this is actually a pretty exciting signing and call up for the Panthers. He's fourth on the checkers in goals, right behind Zach Dalpe and Riley Nash. By the way, congratulations to Riley Nash on being part of the Spengler Cup. And even in this first season, even though there's a little bit of growing pains coming to the North American ice, still this guy is producing.
I agree. I think he looked he flashed some skill in preseason, and I think it's a good chance to bring him up because as we know, when Anthony Duclair gets back in the lineup, he's immediately going back in the top six. So, and that's right around the corner. He skated today in a regular jersey. He wasn't a part of line rushes or anything like that, but he did skate at practice. He's getting very, very close to returning. Could not come at a better time for the Panthers, who have really looked for some help in the top six at the wing position. So Duclair coming back soon. We're really sorting out who's going to fill out those depth lines. Now on Anton Lundell's left wing, it's really just been a black hole without Mason Marchment. They have not found who's going to fill in on that left wing position. The fourth line, Eric Stahl, he's kind of anchored down that fourth line center role. Nick Cousins is going to be in the bottom six. He's played pretty well. The openings are really in the bottom six wings, and I think Anton Levchi coming in, he's going to have a good shot to do that. I'm excited about it. I think I'd love to see him in the top six for a spell with Barkov and see if there may be some chemistry there. But I'm excited. He's a really skilled guy. Not a knock at all on the guys who got sent down. It's a tough position that they were put in. I think Grigory Denisenko really flashed some talent, some energy. I think the skill is there. He came within inches of his first career goal at least 2 or 3 times. But I think he'll head back to Charlotte with a lot of confidence. Giovanni Smith came in, brought some effort, some energy. His fight with Matt Martin wasn't exactly the best demonstration of what he can do, but at least showed a bit of a pulse in that game. Not a whole lot of guys take on Matt Martin, so I'm really happy we have those guys in the organization now. With Anton Levchi coming in, just a real injection of skill in the bottom six, and I personally think he's going to produce better in the NHL than he has shown in the AHL at times because there's more opportunity for skill. He's playing with more skilled players. He's going to go on a line with Lundell and Reinhart to start. That's a lot of skill to be playing with. as long as he can be sound defensively, I think he's going to have a good shot to produce some offense. So I'm excited for it. And it's good to get some guys back healthy. Chris Tierney was a guy who was playing really well before his injury. The bottom six, he can fill in any role in the bottom six, and I think guys on the third and fourth line, they're going to have to play well if they want to stay in the lineup because Chris Tierney is right there.
Yeah, and let's not forget that before Chris Tierney went down, him, Zach Dalpe, and Grigory Denisenko, those guys were producing in two straight games, and the game against Tampa, I believe that line was the only one that got on the board. And I actually, I just checked my Twitter DMs. I decided to send a Twitter DM to the play-by-play voice of the Charlotte Checkers, TJ Shalott, to quickly, like literally like 10 minutes before we recorded, saying, do you have any quick thoughts on Anton Levchi? And he actually replied. I got a reply. So gonna read this. It's a little long, but worth reading. So here's the message of his thoughts on Anton Levchi. On record, he certainly started off quickly, getting off to a hot start. Since then, he's cooled off a bit, but the raw talent is there. He's adapted incredibly quickly to the North American style play. Sometimes those EuroLeague guys can take a minute or two to adjust. Not so for Levchi. Always plays top line minute, and coaches trust him to contribute with guys like Nash, Dalpe when he's there. He's a smooth skater, not afraid to bring the physicality neither. Loves to go unnoticed and get changes when slipping in behind the defense. He's accurate and knows how to finish his shots. Off record, I personally think that the call-up will be short-lived. He needs more time developing in the AHL and the Florida Panthers style of play, so I wouldn't expect them to burst on the scene or anything like that. He's a future piece for Florida, but I don't think he's the answer right now. It'll be great to see some experience at the top level and see how he adjusts, close quote. So, listen, when you mentioned it with Duclair, Patrick Hornquist, also to mention, he was on the ice as well after the Florida Panthers wrapped up things. He might get a little bit of a taste right now with the cap space that's available. Of course, once those guys are activated, right back down to Charlotte as well. Matt Kiersted's going to be right back to Charlotte as well, and we're gonna be right back to 20 players more than likely. Whether it's Duclair being activated or Hornquist. So a little bit of a taste right now for Levchi, and with the hopefully increase in cap and cheap contracts as well, this is where Bill Zito needs to make his money. We've spoken about Forsling. We've spoken even about Duclair betting on himself after being an all-star in Ottawa. And these are the signings that you got to make your money if you're Bill Zito.
I agree, especially in a position where the Panthers are, as far as their prospect pool, it's a little bit depleted because of some trades. They don't have a ton of draft assets to use. So you have to really win on some of these bargain signings. Levchi's a guy who has the talent, the skill, the ability to do it. We've had some guys come over from Europe who didn't really want to stick around and develop. A guy who played at the time on Tampere and was leading scorer of the league a few years back. Henrik Hoppala is another one who comes to mind, who came over, didn't adapt as well to the North American style of play, and then didn't really want to stick around to develop. Ended up going back to Europe where he was more comfortable. As long as Anton Levchi is a guy who's committed to learning the North American style of play, he has all the ability necessary to do it. And I'm excited for what he's going to show. It's a really good opportunity for him. Playing against bottom six NHLers, he's going to come in on the third line. He's not going to have to play against the top end guys. There may be an opportunity for some power play minutes as well. And then two really, really skilled guys in Anton Lundell and Sam Reinhart, who are much better than your average third liners that he could be playing with. I think it's a good opportunity for him. I'm really excited to see what he's going to show. And what really stood out to me about those comments you just read, he loves to quietly change, fly under the radar. That is a classic. He's a classic case of a Finland hockey player. Under the radar, does everything right, smart fundamentals, and then he's going to know every trick there is to know about how to maneuver behind defensemen. He's going to be a crafty player. That's what Finland puts out, and I'm excited for him. If we can get a little bit of chemistry built there on that third line, he and Lundell, the two Finns, I'm excited to see what he's going to show.
Mm-hmm. And Sasha Barkov's the easy person to think of when it comes to to those traits. But another player I think of is Etu Lusterena in the season that he's having, and just once again 1 goal away from tying his career high in goals, and just an increased role for him as well. So just needing to adjust, getting his opportunity, even if it's short lived, but still, you know that based on the resume from his time in Liga, that if it does eventually transcend, might take a little bit, but no surprises should be there if he happens to burst on the scene. But in segment number 3, we are going to be previewing Thursday's game against the Montreal Canadiens, and also talk a little bit about World Juniors for the Florida Panthers and their prospects participating in the games. And we're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Jacob Winans is back for another edition of the show. So a little bit of a World Juniors update for the Florida Panthers prospects in the tournament. Marek Alsher for Team Czechia hasn't played in any of the 2 games so far for Team Czechia. Ludvig Janssen distributed 3 assists in their 11-0 win over Austria. Sandis Vilmanis in their game against USA thought he had great pace of play, even though he's the Florida Panthers prospect, in my opinion, that has probably shined the most and showed the most pace. I mean, the 11-0 win for Sweden over Austria, I was at work during that, so I didn't get a chance to watch that game, but Ludvig Janssen did get 3 assists on that one. But and any thoughts on any of the games that you watched throughout the tournament? We did both talk about pre-recording about Czechia's 5-2 win on Tuesday over Canada. Connor Bedard, as great as advertised, but man, the amount of dumb penalties that Team Canada took, along with that 5-minute major that resulted in 2 goals in that one. I believe it was Zach Dean of the Vegas Golden Knights prospect pool that got that. But any thoughts on the World Junior tournament so far?
Yeah, as an American hockey fan, obviously it was satisfying to see Canada get humbled a little bit in the first game. For the first time really in the last several years, I'm really watching this World Juniors kind of with not really any special attention on anyone, because it is kind of an underwhelming year if you're looking for Panthers prospects. Nothing wrong with that. It's just the Panthers prospect pool. Not as oversaturated as it once was. We've had to use some assets, and a lot of our guys are now in the system, out of the prospect pool age, where they're considered World Junior eligible. So in the past, we always watched Matthew Samoskevich with great scrutiny, or Spencer Knight, or Grigory Denisenko, or Heponiemi, Lundell, all these guys who Owen Tippett, all these guys who came through the World Junior tournament that we were hyper focused on. Not really doing that this time around, just kind of enjoying some hockey and seeing the next generation of players. So it was nice to see Canada take that loss. Some of the Panthers prospects, they're later round picks, underrated guys, and we'll see if any of them can really flash, catch the attention of the scouting department, and maybe earn themselves a contract. Casper Puccio is a guy who was able to do that, really capitalized on a strong World Juniors. So yeah, it's fun to see the young guys play. The World Juniors is one of those tournaments where it's kind of almost like March Madness with college basketball. It's just so much pride. People are playing for the right reasons. It's just kind of intense passion for just really one of the purest forms of the sport you can see is World Junior hockey. So yeah, it's been cool. It's definitely been a good start. And some of these teams, man, I feel like the talent gap has closed, with some of the countries looking a lot better than they have before. It's not really just USA versus Canada guaranteed anymore. it's been pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, and also to mention one player did not mention Jacob for the Florida Panthers. Czech is right now. I'm actually have it on my phone right now. They're up 7-0 over Austria. Jacob still doesn't have a limited amount of minutes for Team Czechia, more in the bottom role for them. No points throughout the tournament as well. And you mentioned Kasper Rapuccio in the August edition of the World Juniors, played with Atu Ratu as well in that tournament, who unfortunately scored against the Panthers in his NHL debut on Friday. The moment that we saw Atu Ratu say that he was going to make his NHL debut, it's like, we've seen this guy play before quite recently. But just the fact, like you said, the fact that there aren't that many Florida Panther players playing in the tournament, it's for me, it's been more at ease watching these. But of course, we know what the mission is for the Panthers. It's just they're in, and they can't tank because all of their picks are gone. And looking at Tankathon right now and where their pick to Montreal stands right now, not good right now for the Panthers. But that's a good way to segue to Thursday's game, because our next episode for Locked On Panthers will be on a Fairbanks Friday. We're gonna, like we said, holiday season. We're gonna take tomorrow off, and then we'll recap Thursday's game against the Montreal Canadiens. But one thing, of course, we spoke about even in segment number 1, talking about the teams that are behind. The Montreal Canadiens have games in hand but the problem for Montreal is depth scoring for them. They have decent goaltending. Sam Montembeault is actually, even though he's the backup goaltender, he's had the better season than Jake Allen statistically. They protected Jake Allen in the expansion draft just a few years ago. Caulfield and Suzuki, 19 goals, and then 15 the other. Kirby Dach looks to revive his career as he's leading the team in assists, and just needed a new change of scenery. You know, it's funny. Some of the Montreal Canadiens players were actually at the Dolphins-Packers game on Sunday. Mike Hoffman and Cole Kaufman. Yeah, Cole Caulfield is actually a Packers fan from Wisconsin. Of course, went to University of Wisconsin, won the Hobie Baker there. They've been in Florida for a little bit. They'll be playing on the second of a back-to-back on Thursday, which there's NHL games going on Tuesday and Wednesday. So this actually could work out in the Florida Panthers' favor. I knock on wood, but the fact that they have this much of an extended break to actually get healthy with all the injuries that they have and playing on the second of a back-to-back, part of me says they should take advantage. But then the other part of me is like, Armando, don't have any expectations.
Yeah, with this season, I'm almost beyond getting my hopes up. And I don't mean that to sound super doom and gloom and pessimistic, but their past 2 games have been against opponents coming off of back-to-backs in which their opponent lost. So you would think perfect opportunity to kick a team while they're down, and the Panthers completely fumbled the bag. So I don't want to get my hopes up or anything, but they're in a good position coming out of the break to really hit the ground running and make back some ground, put some points in the bank, get your season back on track. They have a real chance to do that. Montreal is a team that they should, on paper, take advantage of. They're hopefully going to be coming into that game near full strength. We're hoping that the only two injured players that won't participate will be Anthony Duclair and Patrick Hornquist. Based on what we saw at practice, they should be completely healthy. Other than that, with Aaron Ekblad, Paul Maurice said that his non-contact status today was mostly precautionary, and they actually had Ekblad dishing out hits. He just wasn't allowed to take any, which perfectly fine by me. Protect him at all costs. And then Radko Gudas coming back is going to really help the defense. I was appreciative of the patient approach they took, letting him take a slow approach to returning from a concussion. He's a very physical guy. His game is all about contact. So if he needed a little extra time to be able to not just absorb contact and absorb hits, but he dishes out a lot of hits too. And that's still a lot of human mass colliding. So just because he's a punishing hitter does not mean his body doesn't feel the effects of that as well. So I was happy that they gave him some time. Now we should have a lot of our troops back. I think a game against Montreal is a perfect opportunity for them to capitalize and immediately get some points back in the bank against a team that's right there with them in the standings. It was cool seeing Mike Hoffman there at the Dolphins game. We all know Mike Hoffman as a former Panther power play specialist. Definitely one of the best snipers, one of the best shooters that the Panthers have had in the last decade or so. That one timer was lethal. Always was a fan of Mike Hoffman in his time here. But yeah, definitely no friends when the time comes tomorrow night, Thursday night against the Canadiens. And I would love to see Sam Montembeault in goal too. He personally was one of my personal favorites in goal for the Panthers. I hated that we lost him on waivers. I thought he had a bright future here. He still clearly has a bright future in the NHL. Cool for him playing in his hometown, and the couple times I got to meet him, one of the nicest dudes in that Panthers room. So good. It'll be good to see those guys back home against Florida. But yeah, it's really feels like an early playoff game. I got a question for you. Do you think the Panthers go into that one with any thoughts about where their draft pick is going, or do you think that's something the players don't think about? The front office just thinks about it because we're not only are we playing for the playoffs, but any game against Montreal, you're trying to sabotage their draft position. It would really not. You don't want to lose games to the Canadiens because those are points that are going to hurt your or help their draft stock and hurt yours.
I think Bill Zito thinks about it more than the players do. They just
agree.
They just go out and play. Versus the front office, they just it's just like tanking. Players don't tank. Front offices do. So when it comes to getting down on the ice or the field, whichever sport you watch, but that I think it's Bill Zito that's the one that and company that really thinks more about that. But the keys to this game, the Montreal Canadiens are last in power play percentage, so a perfect PK is necessary, and both in the bottoms of both goals for and goals against. So like we said, that depth scoring is outside of Caulfield and Suzuki is you shut those guys down, that you'll find a way to win, even in a low scoring game, because low scoring games against the Montreal Canadiens, most times you'll come out on top against this team. And like we spoke about, losing Montembeault hurts because this is actually his best season that he's had. Of course, with Bob and Spencer Knight, we knew it was going to be those two, and of course, losing Drieger, losing Montembeault along the way as well. You know that this franchise is stuck with these two at least for the next 3 years after that, unless they find a way to trade Bobrovsky out, which I don't see before his no move clause becomes a modified no trade on July 1st. So on July 1st of 2024, excuse me. So that it's really sometimes when contracts that big or promising prospects that were highly drafted, sometimes you risk losing someone, and Sam Montembeault for the Panthers was just a guy that they unfortunately lost. And of course, like we spoke about earlier, Chris Drieger, that's really what you're going to lose good players in the process, and that's what happens with good teams. There's still, I believe, really a good talented hockey team, but the urgency needs to start and begin on Thursday. So, Jacob, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Not an easy one to talk about, really, the state of the team being as behind as they are right now, and at this point, it's one game at a time. Start by winning on Thursday, and then of course they'll be on a back-to-back. They'll be facing Carolina on Friday, and then we go from there. But tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. Win or lose, rain or shine, I'm definitely going to be talking Panthers hockey all year, and going forward after that. One game at a time, and we're gonna enjoy some hockey either way. Thanks for having me on again, and hopefully everybody's enjoying their holiday season. Take as much time as you can with your families and enjoy this time of year, and we'll regroup for some Panthers hockey in a couple days.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob, and I'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and all of your World Junior coverage with Heidi Kalakash, Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Peter Bukowski brings in local experts from each of the 4 major sports to talk about the state of their teams and the take of the day. Follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.